James Cratch, Keith Sargent, fellas, we have a basketball season here. I was thinking about this, and this is the kind of thing that has just been a pleasure to cover. It's been a lot of fun, and it's almost like our world has been flipped upside down. After going through a lot of things, a lot of teams that you're expecting to lose, now you're watching this Scarlet Knights basketball team, expecting them to win, and you're surprised, as I think most of us were, when they're down 6 points to Nebraska late, and you're thinking, this is a game that they can't lose. They really don't want to go 2 in a row. This is the one that would be the first, X mark on their NCAA tournament resume. And boom, they storm back 9 points in a row to finish the game. Geo Baker with a clutch onions level 3. I mean, Cratch, give me a sense. You were in the building. Give me a sense how you were feeling during that comeback. Did you think it was inevitable? Were you surprised that they were down? I mean, what were the emotions in the building?
I was surprised they were down. Just because, it was weird. Like, I looked back at the box score from when they beat them out of Nebraska, and the thing that didn't kind of travel was the advantage on the boards and in the paint. But then at the same time, you felt like Miles Johnson was dominant. So it was kind of hard to kind of match those two things together. But when they're down 72-66 with 2:45 to go, I just had this feeling like they're going to find a way to win the game. And afterwards, I was like, how can I, I've only covered Rutgers for my third year now. I've never been at a point where, in that sort of situation where I've been like, oh yeah, Rutgers is going to find a way to win the game. It's really a remarkable feeling. And I thought my biggest takeaway was after the game and the press conference, where it seemed like Steve Peichel, who has been, just throwing out all the talking points all year long, got picked to finish 12th in the Big Ten. We're young, one game at a time. It's a journey, all that stuff. When I asked him, hey, this is the first regular season home and home sweep that you've had since you joined the Big Ten. Was that a little thing or a big thing? And Steve Peichel said, yeah, it's a big thing. So even he is acknowledging, he can't even deny anymore that this is a renaissance and there is something happening here, and this team looks like an NCAA tournament team.
Yeah, and that's a great point. To Steve's point, I'll go back, and right now they're positioning themselves to not even be an issue on Selection Sunday, which is kind of crazy in itself, right? I mean, I was talking to someone else. Since 1991, they haven't been in the NCAA tournament. Everyone knows that, but they've really only been on the bubble one time, maybe two if you want to count 2006, the year they went to the NIT championship. I guess they were pretty close, late in the year if they would have beat Virginia Tech, but really they weren't on the bubble on Selection Sunday. Only one time did they actually go into that selection show thinking there was any chance, and that was it might have been Kevin Bannon's second to last year. So they're trying to put themselves on a position where it's not even an issue. And if they, I've read all these different, different bracketologists so far who have said that, it would be nice if they won another road game, which of course it would. But if they win out, if they do what if they make Cratch prophetic and end up going 19-0 at home, they're going to be in the NCAA tournament, because that's going to give them enough wins and enough conference wins, and won't even be an issue. But as of now, they're just trying to get in position where it's not even an issue.
All right, and then that's a great point, because in no other town, no other college town in the country right now does a team have Rutgers' record and resume, and they're sitting there going, "Oh boy, I hope we get in." This is not a discussion in Chapel Hill or Tallahassee or or Norman, Oklahoma. If you are 15-5 and you're in the top 20 and all these different rankings, any metric you use, the pick one, KenPom, net ratings, they have a great resume in any of those things. Right now, SB Nation has them as a 5 seed. Jerry Palm CBS has them as a 6 seed. This is, they are like, multiple losses away from being a bubble team, Cratch. I mean, this is, even if they don't get that road win, I know everybody thinks that that's the box they have to check. No teams really have that except Michigan State and Illinois. The two teams that have won on the road. It's been very hard to win in the Big Ten. Yeah, I mean, they could just cruise through 19-0 at home and they're going to be in. There's no question about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Brad Wachtel kind of tweeted something out that no team has made the NCAA tournament with that large bid. I think it was like about 5 like neutral court / road victories in the last 3 years. But and I know that's important, and that's definitely a key data point. But the Big Ten, I think this year is just so strange. I forget who it was. I think maybe it was David Jones and Penn Live who put this out. Like in the beginning of January, people were looking at Ohio State and saying like that team's going to make the NCAA. That team could go to the Final Four.
Yeah.
Now they look at Ohio State and they're like, we don't even know if this team's going to make the tournament.
Right.
The Big Ten is just such this weird setup, and everyone's so dominant at home that if Rutgers goes 19-0 at home, I think they're definitely in. They're probably in with room. So, yeah, I don't think this is like, I know Rutgers fans are afraid that suddenly the carpet's going to get pulled out from under them. But as long as the team keeps winning at home, and they're going to be favored the rest of the way, I don't see them not getting in the tournament.
2 things, sorry.
Steve, have we decided yet if they do go 19-0, considering, are we going to play back that tape of Cratch? I think you said it like, when did he say? He said in October, September is basically when he said it, that they're going to go, like, are we going to honor him in any way if they do go 19-0?
I got to tell the audience something, though, because Cratch he has a tendency to make a lot, he says a lot of things that are just crazy.
He does.
And they all do not come true. So every now and then when he says something like, I don't know why they don't go 19-0, and we laugh at him, it's because we laughed at the previous 13 things he said that did not happen.
Well, it doesn't matter. Right. No one remembers when you're wrong.
This one, which would be real. I mean, you'd have to tip your cap, and we have to hang a banner in Cratch's New Brunswick apartment. We'd have to put one up.
Well, here's the thing. Like, what have I got? Like, I'm trying to think. Like, what crazy proclamations have I made that haven't come true?
I mean, Jeff Monken for Army coach was a pretty good one.
That wasn't a prediction, though. That was merely an opinion.
That's true. Good point. All right, fair enough.
We'll have to get back to you on the next podcast. I'm sure there's one or two.
We'll come up with something. If not, we'll just make.
I mean, I did pick them in football to be Wisconsin 2 years ago. And in my defense, if Chris Ash, wasn't just keep it close, Chris, they may have had a shot. We got a punt, 4th and 7 from the 44. Got a punt.
Right, you'd have Liberty competing for the national championship the way you hyped him in.
Well, if that onside kick, if they recover that was a bad call. Who knows what happens in that situation?
All right, fair enough.
At least no one on this podcast actually put Rutgers, in a bowl game, back in
2018.
We'll forget that one. Getting back to basketball, I tell you, the one thing that impresses me about this team, Sarge, is that you have a guy like Ron Harper who dominates, just absolutely destroys Iowa on the road, 29 points, on 10 of 14 shooting. And then he comes back in this game, and he had a bad day. He was just off. He just wasn't involved from the start. And they still win, they find other guys. There's just a lot of guys contributing. And I think it's important that they have that kind of depth and balance, that they can rely on different people. And I think it was important in this game that Steve Peichel trusted his star, Geo Baker, with the ball in his hands late in the game. And I think that making that shot will build up his confidence. I mean, what do you think about those 2 points?
Yeah, I think it's a mark of depth. I was thinking about it. They're basically down to he's gotten the rotation down to 9. You could say 10 maybe if to core, but he's not really part of the 9. It's interesting the way he plays it. Generally, he'll sub in all 4 guys, his top 4 subs at about the 14 minute mark and let them play. So it's almost like putting in a whole new lineup and letting them go. And then, he really has trimmed down the rotation to the way he wants it. It kind of, makes up for a lot of ills when, a guy like Geo Baker, who gets injured, and then takes a little while to get back in the form. Ron Harper, like you said, has an off night. I would say getting back to the rotation is, one key thing. If you notice, they've fallen behind early in these games, last 2 home games, 10-2 against Minnesota, 9-2 against Nebraska. I would look to maybe try to get Geo Baker back into the starting lineup, maybe to give him a little bit of confidence as well. He's a starter. He should probably be starting these games. I would probably put Kalen McConnell back to his normal bench role. Either way, at this point, I think, we went into the season thinking, well, it's almost an embarrassment of riches with all these guards, and Steve Pikiell has really done a good job utilizing
All right, Kratz, let's break down the rest of the schedule here. We've got 11 games left, bookended by Purdue. We'll start with Purdue at home on Tuesday, end of the regular season with Purdue on March 7th. In between, 3 games against ranked team. 2 of them are Maryland, at Maryland, at home against Maryland. Illinois is number 21. I mean, when you look at this now, where do you see the game that you circle as a concern, one that you're like, this could be trouble, and the game where you think, all right, this is one that they could steal to kind of put the bow on their resume?
Well, I think the real concern, and our friend of the podcast counterpart, I guess you wouldn't say colleague, Danny Breslau, I bounced into him as I was walking into the rack on Saturday. He made a great point. He said, everyone talks about, getting a road win. Rutgers has to avoid a landmine.
Yeah.
They were able to navigate one on Saturday against Nebraska. It was much closer than anyone would have hoped. Northwestern at home, February 9th, Sunday night, 6:30, weird time, weird tip-off. Crowd I'm sure it's going to be sold out, but you don't know how many people are actually going to be in the stadium on a Sunday night. That's a tough one. I remember this team lost to Northwestern last year when Northwestern was pretty bad. And, Northwestern's, again, the bottom of the league. You can't have that landmine. I almost feel like this team would be better off decisively losing every road game the rest of the way, as long as they hold serve at home. Because if they lose to Northwestern, you don't want to give the selection committee a reason to keep you out of the tournament.
Right.
Northwestern would do that. The one they can steal, to me, is I think at Penn State would be a major feather in their cap. Maryland's really good at home. I think they're undefeated at home. Wisconsin is a tough place to play. With a quick turnaround after you play Michigan at home. I think the Michigan game at the Garden in a week, is kind of a toss-up. I would say at Penn State, that's where they can steal one. Because they could win at Ohio State, but Ohio State struggled so much. I don't even know if that has the same kind of impact that it would have a couple weeks ago.
Sort of the problem, Stars. They don't, you talk about you got to win road games. They don't have 5 opportunities. I mean, Michigan's a neutral site game. I mean, I guess that would certainly be, in my mind, that would count as certainly a quality away from home win. But, you got as Kratz said, at number 17, Maryland. They are, I think, behind, they're very good behind other Michigan State. They're the second best team in the league. Ohio State, another tough place to play. Wisconsin, Penn State, and Purdue, bad match. I mean, it's going to be tough to find that next road game.
Probably Penn State would probably be their best opportunity. Maryland, I watched them today against Indiana. Maryland's good. They hung on to win the game, and Maryland might be the best team in the Big Ten at this point. Ohio State, like you said, is there was at one point where they were a top 5 team in the country, and people were thinking that they might be the best chance to actually get to the Final Four in the Big Ten, but. At this point, again, I think it might be a little bit of overrated. You have to remember, guys, that when you get to Selection Sunday, there's a lot of teams with warts. I mean, there's a lot of teams with bad losses. Kentucky, had a really bad loss early in the year. There's a lot of teams if Rutgers' biggest wart is not having any. If they're sitting there with 22, 23 wins, and they don't have that marquee road win. I think that
debate right there is not about whether they're in or not. It's whether or not they're a 4 seed. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think any people would be happy just to see them pop up on the screen. That if they don't have a good road win, they might not be seated high, right? I mean, that's sort of
if you're a Rutgers fan, you don't want to be, and this is, again, we're talking about what the stuff that I thought I wouldn't be saying at this point, in January. But if you're, you don't want to be 8-9 because if you're 8-9, then you have to play a 1 seed, in the second round. So if they're anywhere between 5 through 7, that's fine. I mean, it's sadly, you don't want a total swoon, but You don't want to be in the position where you have to play a 1 seed.
And this is the thing this year with college basketball is that there's certainly no great team. There aren't very, very, very good teams. There's just a lot of teams. And this is my question to you, Cratch, about this. When, now watching, I think I've seen everybody in the Big Ten, maybe, I don't know if I've watched Northwestern, but anybody worth it, I've watched some of their games. And I haven't seen a lot of teams. Like you watch Iowa, like, okay, well, they're very good, but they're not great. Are we seeing, is the Big Ten, just strong from top to bottom? Is it mediocre from top to bottom? I mean, what is your sense when you look at this league? Like, how is this conference going to do when it does get 9 teams into the tournament? What do we expect to see from the league overall?
This is kind of a cop-out, but I don't know.
Yeah, no.
Like, I could see this being a situation where the Big Ten, they get 10 teams, 11 teams in, and 8 of them make the second round, and they've got 6 in the Sweet 16. Or it could be one of those situations where, a couple of, I think it was last year, the year before, everyone talked about how great the Big East was, and all of a sudden it was Sunday, and Villanova was the only team left. So I think it's, and I think this probably what you said, you're right, Rutgers is in the tournament. I cannot wait. For when Rutgers is a 5 seed and people are like, oh, we got 5-12, got to play Tulsa. What's going to happen here?
Great. It's going to be great. Oh, of course, the selection committee screwed us with that matchup. It's going to be hilarious.
5-12 game. Here comes Cleveland State. They're hot. Gary Waters' revenge game. No. But no, and I will say this too. Rutgers, priority number 1 is to make the NCAA tournament. It seems well on its way. After that, it's gravy. I think in a perfect world, you get a seed where you're in Albany somehow, and you can play Seton Hall on the second weekend if all the magic falls in place. That's the best. That's what they should hope for.
Anyway, this is the main takeaway, though, that this is just a lot of fun. It really is. And, it's fun to be able to have this conversation about the Big Ten, the broader picture, to look at the standings, to see them, a game game behind. It's just, it makes everything easier to cover. And, the fact that it's different. The team is very likable. It's going to be a fun month, so I'm looking forward to it. All right. Do we want to shift gears to football? We have some football news. And I know we have a lot of questions.
Well, Rutgers is a basketball school. I mean, they're a basketball school.
That's a good
Why
point.
do we have to talk?
Signing off here, Steve. No, wait, we have to talk. We're contractually obligated. If we don't, Greg Shannon's going to call us and ask what happened. So this is interesting. The transfer portal giveth, the transfer portal taketh away, and now it's taking us away. I mean, Cratch, this is not I don't know that Mojabi was going to be a player, but certainly Mike Vietti is a guy that they were counting on. I mean, what do you see from the development? First, tell us what happened development-wise with the transfer portal, and what do you think it means?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, it's been kind of a steady trickle. You had Eddie Lewis going to transfer portal, Malik Dixon, obviously Davon Robinson, Raheem Blackshear obviously went in portal. I mean, until Friday night, Blackshear was the only big loss Rutgers had. I mean, Eddie Lewis and Malik Dixon were guys who had really kind of fallen down the depth chart, even though they had starting experience this past season. And everyone else who had gone to portal had ended up in an FCS school. Blackshear going to Virginia Tech, that was the only real big blow, and I think. But now to lose, Mojabi was a guy who, look, he was a guy who was trusted. He played a lot his 3 years here. He had 15 catches for, I think, close to 200 yards and a touchdown last year, which obviously isn't anything great, but you got to understand how bad, Rutgers' passing offense was for most of his time here. He was a guy who blocked well. He was a reliable player who got on the field over a lot of the, every year it seemed like Rutgers would bring in a new crop of wide receivers, and everyone would say, these are the guys who are going to finally produce. And by the end of the year, Mojabi, if he was healthy, was still starting, still playing a bigger role with those guys. So, and I think he's a guy who's going to end up at a Power 5 school. He's as I said, he's a reliable player. Doesn't have the best hands in the world. But then to lose Mike Maietti, I think is a big blow. Look, Mike Maietti, I've always said, yes, he's undersized. He's not necessarily the most dominant physical center you're going to find in college football, the Big Ten. But I always thought Mike Maietti stood for something in the sense that, one, he was a great team leader. I think he's a guy who, I remember John McNulty told me he would have last year, but obviously before John got let go, he would be stunned if Mike wasn't a captain at Rutgers by the end of his career. So, sort of shades of Jonah Jackson, being in the team meeting front row, tweeting out the photo, and then, he's gone a couple of days later. I think Jonah was obviously a better player than Mike, but Mike was a very effective center. I think he was probably top to bottom Rutgers' best offensive lineman last year. And he always, to me, was the type of kid that Rutgers has to have to win in the Big Ten. The Jersey kid who's tough, who plays it over his head, who wants to be here, who they can develop and invest, and he turns into a 3-4 year starter. It's a tough blow. I mean, Rutgers didn't want to let him go, and I think my understanding is that basically, he can graduate. He loves Rutgers, but he wants to, go get a graduate degree elsewhere, experience something new, and frankly, he probably can go to a school like Vanderbilt. Pete Rossamondo is there, and they were pretty close. Obviously, Rossamondo, the former Rutgers offensive line coach. BC would not shock me if BC were to get in the mix, because it just seems like Jeff Hafley wants to contest Jersey with Schiano. I think that's one of the kind of developing storylines we've got going on here. But yeah, I just think it's a situation where it's a tough blow. But I think last year when Jonah Jackson left and Nakia Griffin Stewart and Max Anthony, it really kind of rocked the program. I don't think it's going to have that same devastating impact this time, because I think it's a lot firmer footing with Schiano back. But it's not something, every time Rutgers gets a guy from the transfer portal, he's about to break out. And every time a guy leaves, fans say why he's not good enough. This is a blow. Don't let people on the message board tell you.
And this actually segues into what I thought was a really good question from David Melman on the Rutgers Insider, Sergeant. It's and we'll get to all the questions from everyone who signed up on NJ.com/text. But this is the one that struck me: is this a case? When you see guys in the transfer portal, is this a case of the coaching staff nudging them in there and saying, okay, we're moving in a different direction, you're not a good fit? Or is this a case of Rutgers being rejected by the players themselves? I guess we don't really know. We don't really know all the answers. I get the sense certainly that they would have liked to keep as many veteran players around, knowing Greg. I mean, what do you think? Are we looking at a situation where these players have just decided that, you know what, I'm not a good fit here, I need to move on while I can? Or is this also an incident of the coach clearing out space?
Yeah, not in these two examples, because I'll say this. I mean, Mo Jabi, obviously his cousin is Mohamed Sanu, who played for Graciano and is obviously a Rutgers legend. If he wanted to finish out his time, Graciano is not going to try to push him out. And Mike Maietti, another program guy from a North Jersey parochial school, who was on track to be a captain. Cratch is right. It is eerily similar to Jonah Jackson, same position. Basically, a possible captain sitting in the front row in a team meeting. But that's kind of the way it is now. And the reason why they do it that way is so that they can get their spring semester paid. So if you set foot on campus, and enroll in classes, and you can get the entire semester paid. So that's the reason why they do it with the timing. I don't think there, in any way where there are kids, certainly, that Graciano probably has a legitimate, honest conversation with, who says you might not be playing this year, but Maietti and Jabi were not among them.
All right, let's dive into the Rutgers Insider questions. As always, guys, I know it's a slow season, but we are in there several times a day, texting and chatting and answering your questions, and we appreciate you sending these through for Rutgers Insider, NJ.com/text. And still a lot of uncertainty about the coaching staff, Cratch. We want to know who's being targeted for the special teams coaching spot. And along those lines, this is one that comes up all the time. Any chance on reeling Berger back in? And if not, why the change from earlier in the season? I mean, what do you think on those two?
Well, I think I'll start with Berger. I don't see it happening. I mean, I think the fact that he committed to Wisconsin, and that was we're taping this almost a month ago now that he made the commitment to Wisconsin, and signing day is about a week, 10 days away, and there has not been an official visit to Rutgers. So I think that Rutgers skin in the Jalen Berger game, I think, was probably a little bit exaggerated or overblown. So he's going to Wisconsin. I think the fact that Rutgers only has 2-3 spots left, and they're obviously people expect them to look for a quarterback. They're going hard after Paris Shand, defensive tackle. They brought in some other guys. They've offered. I think it's clear Burgers. And getting Aaron Cruikshank, Wisconsin transfer was a big pickup out of the portal. I think it's clear Burgers not going here. As for the last position on the coaching staff, well, one I can say, Nunzio Campanelli is going to coach tight ends again. Augie Hoffman's going to coach running backs. Looks like Colby Smith will not be returning. What I've heard from people is that Greg Schiano is looking to hire a special teams coordinator, a guy who handles just special teams. Not, like Chris Ash had it where like every coach on the staff handled one specific team, or a coach handled a position group and special teams, just a special teams coordinator. But that being said, everyone I've talked to said it's not like, when you're talking about defensive line coach, everyone knew, Jim Panagos is at the top of the list. There's no obvious fit for this thing. And I expect Greg to kind of take his time with this hire. Obviously, maybe there'll be some movement after signing day, which is, I believe, February 5th. As staffs kind of shuffle again across the nation. But that's what people are expecting. Expecting a special teams coordinator who focuses on all special teams. Obviously, that was something that was really big for Greg, key to Rutgers winning games his first time around. But don't really have any great candidate name list. I've heard some guys speculated, but nothing firm.
And to close that loop about the coaching staff, Colby Smith has been let go, correct? Right.
Yes, all indications. Right. There's no place for him on the staff. I guess in theory he could stick around, and obviously he's got a year left in his contract. Rutgers is going to have to pay him no matter what. But my expectation is that
will be running backs coach. Is that the understanding?
That's yes. Nunzio is Twitter official. He's tight end.
This is another good one that ties into one more, and we're going to get to more basketball questions in a minute. But while we're on football, with all of these departures in the transfer portal, what does that mean for the scholarship total, and will it reflect in what we see on signing day? Do either one of you have an idea if this changes the numbers that they might get going forward immediately, or is this something more down the line?
Well, they'll get the scholarship back at the once they hit the summer, but they still have I believe the number that's like all indications are they're going to be able to sign 25 total for this signing cycle. And there's some thought that they may be able to add a 26th guy and count that toward the 2019 signing class, which makes sense because remember, one, you had Rayon Buell, that defensive tackle from the Buffalo area who came in and basically left after a week of like summer workouts. So I'm not, maybe they were able to work some NCAA loophole and get that one back. And also remember Ron Johnson from Camden, never showed up after we thought he was going to be a grad transfer from Michigan. But my guess is will happen is obviously these scholarships are being freed up to get to 25, 26, 25, 26, whatever the number is. Chances are that Greg will probably, what they usually do is any scholarships that are left over, you give it to a deserving, junior or senior walk-on, usually a senior walk-on because that kid's going to graduate. That kid's going to process out of the program after the season, and it's freed up again. You can go hand it to incoming 2021 member. So they are freeing up scholarships, but it's not going to – I think they already had the number they wanted, and it's not like there's suddenly going to be a bonanza and they can add 10 more guys.
All right, segueing over to some basketball questions. This is a good one, Sarge. And I think if you guys were at the game, so you might not have seen it, but after Gio's shot went in, there was just in the background of the crowd going crazy was athletic director Pat Hobbs, and just the expression of just sheer joy and excitement on his face. The question is, if men's basketball makes the NCAA tournament, does that build back a lot of goodwill between Hobbs and the fan base? He is certainly the one who hired Steve Peichel, gave him the contract extension. Peichel swears by him. What do you think, Sarge? Are we going to see this is the beginning of Pat Hobbs's comeback?
Absolutely. I think, when you look at that hire, and we documented it this past week, this wasn't a clear cut. I mean, Danny Hurley was a guy who Pat Hobbs obviously had conversations with early on. He says that he never offered him, but he was obviously a no-brainer guy who he had to have a conversation with. But then beyond that, there was no clear-cut choice as a plan B. or as anyone else on the short list. And the fact that he identified Steve Peichel, really from an early point on, like he was pretty open about saying that he started investigating and looking into Steve Peichel really from midway through that season when he knew he was going to have to make a change. Gets a lot of credit for being able to identify and make the right hire. A guy who just yesterday, Fred Hoiberg, the Nebraska coach, and every coach. I mean, is kind of a cliche where coaches always say, great job by this other guy, by their counterpart, tip of the cap. But he said, Steve Peichel is one of the best guys in the business. I mean, I don't think he was, that was. You hear a lot of coaches saying that. Give Pat Hobbs a lot of credit for hiring the guy, who has done it the right way, hasn't taken any shortcuts, and I think if they do go to the NCAA tournament,
this is the first time I felt this way in. I mean, and forever, really watching a team where they have a coach, they outcoach teams. I mean, and I didn't think the game against Nebraska was his finest game, obviously, but a game against Iowa, you get punched in the face when they're scoring a lot of points suddenly, and you can't stop a guy, and you still have this incredible comeback late in the game to get in the lead briefly before Iowa won. I mean, you're just seeing things from a coaching acumen that you just haven't seen at Rutgers in a long time.
So, Steve, I saw you texted something, yesterday. I found it interesting because we both covered that 2006 football season where it really came out of, a lot of people thought they were going to be really good. They were coming off a bowl season the year before, but no one thought they were going to be 9-0. Does it remind you of that? Just the way that the season has gone.
Yeah, it does. And why? And it's really simple. And this is the way I felt about the first Giants Super Bowl run, where they won all those road playoff games and stunned Green Bay and beat the undefeated Patriots. Same way I felt about that Rutgers run when they beat Louisville and the campus and everyone excited. It's the newness factor. When something hasn't happened in a long time and everyone is seeing this with fresh eyes, to me, is what makes it so much fun. And I do think there is a degree, as with both of those, and you're right, there was some expectation with football that year, but certainly not top 10 team at one point. But like there were with the Giants was the same way. You did not expect that team to be in the Super Bowl. So the fact that people are still, every time they go out, something exciting happens that they're not expecting to see, to me, that adds another layer to it where it's just, it's just a lot of fun. And, another team this reminds me of, and it's funny, like going through teams I've covered, was that first Nets team with Jason Kidd. And this is going back a ways. I know they've been in Brooklyn for a long time, but just like teams I've covered where all of a sudden you're like, oh, look, they're 7-1. Okay. They're pretty good. And then, they're going to win the Eastern Conference, and then holy cow, they're playing the Lakers in the finals. It's just teams that that kind of catch you by surprise, and that's this. I would put this team so far in that category, absolutely.
I don't know if you've heard. I don't know if you guys have heard, but they were picked
right?
12th before the season. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you would think that someone would remind us of that, like at a press conference every once in a while, but I've heard that. I might have to look it up, but have you heard that, Crash?
Yes, I'm familiar with this.
Who was picked 13th? That guy must be really angry.
It's funny, actually. I think it may have been, I'm not sure, but it's actually funny. Like it actually kind of eats me a little inside, because funny from my, prior life as a high school sports reporter, when the first year, I believe it was 2013, it was like the second year where they had 5 groups for high school football. I predicted Phillipsburg to win North Jersey Section 2 Group 4, but to finish in last place in the Mid-State 38 Delaware Division.
You're never
Phillipsburg won the Delaware Division. And they gave me crap I'm saying, but I picked you guys to win the state title. You can't give me that much grief, but my friends up at the state line didn't really care, but I love those guys.
All right, a few more questions here from the Insider. What are the chances that women's basketball makes the NCAA tournament, and how awesome would it be for both men's and women's teams to be in? And that would be certainly that'd be the first time in forever, right? Have they ever been in a tournament the same year? That's a great. I have to look that one up. I think that. Right.
Well,
No,
there wasn't. Because there wasn't a tournament. I mean, I don't know if. I mean,
91. They weren't
not
in
the NCAA
91?
tournament.
No, I guess not.
Because I think it would be. I don't believe so. I mean, it would be the AIAW. Well, I would say this: Rutgers women's basketball. I'm pulling it up right now. I believe they got blown out. We're taping this on Sunday afternoon. I believe they were blown out. Yes, 71-57 loss at Michigan. So they're kind of, they lost to Michigan State, recently. So they're kind of, again, I think Rutgers has to be worried about it, that annual kind of mid to late season swoon this team has had in recent years might be coming. But that being said, I think the most recent bracketology projection from ESPN's Charlie Cream had them as a 6 seed, I believe. So they have some wiggle room. The Big Ten's a strong league, and they've really been off to a good start. But they have they have a little bit of a bottom heavy schedule. They're gonna play some really good teams down the stretch in Big Ten play. So they're safely in right now. But if they keep losing, and if they kind of hit the skids like they have in recent years,
got to avoid that
could
trip
fall
to
out.
stores in March, which is always where they seem to be. Any update on the Omaruis, Cliff and Eugene? What is going on with the big recruit narrowed it to 5 choices? Rutgers is on there. No new developments since then. And how is Eugene doing out in Oregon? Do we know? Have anybody looked that up? What's going on? He's sitting out this year.
Eugene is sitting out. I think he is.
So neither of the two non-related Omaruis, whose name I could never pronounce when he was here, and so if Cliff comes, I apologize in advance. All right, those are all the.
One fact check, Steve. Rutgers women did go to the NCAA tournament in 1991. I just looked it up.
Oh.
And to Cratchit's point, he's 100% right. And I've talking to people inside the program. They do seem like they're a little banged up. They're not particularly deep, and really the Big Ten is kind of like the men's Big Ten. It's just you look at all these teams. Only 4 teams are below 500 at this point. So you have a bunch of teams that are 4-4, 5-4. Rutgers is at 5-3. At 5-3, they're 4th in the conference right now. So kind of like the men's standings. It's just a jumbled mess. A lot of basketball left to be played.
All right, I'm going to leave. Just notice this one. It's a great question. How loud does it really get at the rack is a question. And it's funny because Griffin Whitmer of the great jack of all trades in the Rutgers athletic department is actually walking around with a decibel reader. Have you seen this tweet? And I guess he got, what was the reading?
Yes.
I guess it was like a loud orchestra, 110. Right.
110. He said it was 110 after Gio's shot, which I'm now looking at Griffin's Twitter. He says that's somewhere between very noisy and pain on this threshold of hearing graph he has. So looks like full symphony orchestra is about 110. 120 would be a hi-hat cymbal strike. Gotcha. 130 would be a live rock band. So
it hasn't gotten to the point where
cymbal strike
it's
there, guys.
Thorndike in the car from High Anxiety. Did anybody catch that reference? Sarge, could you catch that one? No. You did catch it. Okay. You did. Okay. All right. Before your time.
Yeah, I got
that.
Yep.
All right. What else do we got, guys? We have a new president. Hey, you want to talk about that, Sarge? I mean, this guy, you asked him one of these, you asked him a question. He talked for he gave you an essay, like a college essay about his background in athletics. It was a great answer. It was an encouraging answer. I think people at the athletic department are excited by the prospects of him. Give me the little 4-1 on the new guy.
Yeah, I mean, he obviously played football at Stanford, but he did. When I asked him about it, he made it a point. He was on the Stanford football team, but he did not play football at Stanford. He played one play in 5 years at Stanford, his senior year. He even quipped that when his coach asked him to go in, he couldn't even find his helmet. Yeah. So the idea that he was like a super football player, he played with Cory Booker at Stanford. But all that being said, he clearly has a football background. He was a big time recruit, going into Stanford. But he even said, like, more has been written about his football exploits in the past week and a half than in the last than his academic accomplishments. And academically, it's a great fit. From an athletic standpoint, everyone you talk to, and we talked to Pat Hobbs about it. Everyone you talk to is very enthusiastic. Thinks that he's going to be a welcome change, a change agent possibly. With regards to the faculty, still have and they may have legitimate concerns about the spending. We just reported the latest finances. They're about $42 million deficit. That's including loans and stuff that they're going to have to pay back to the university and subsidies from the university bank and then student fees. So there's still some challenging days ahead from a financial standpoint. Faculty is still questioning some of the spending. The new president will have his hands full, certainly to try to bridge that divide. But from just from a enthusiastic standpoint, I think you talk to Pat Hobbs. He's
all right. Well, on that note, this is a good place to end. We have a lot of fun coming up here. A basketball season, a full month of heading in for February, which should be exciting, and leading into March. We're going to have it all covered. Anything else before we sign off, guys? Got it? Check. All right, we're good. All right. We'll see you at the rack. Come visit us in the seats if you're there. Enjoy this incredible season, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks to recap where we are. Thanks for listening.